Hello everybody, my name is Brittany Patrick, and for the past 9 months I've been making history at EKA. So what exactly does that mean? For my project, I really wanted to enhance EKA's education in the history department, because when I grow up, I want to be a history teacher, so I thought this was the best way to get a hands-on involvement and kind of prepare myself for my career. I wanted to do this by bringing in guest speakers and creating an interactive learning experience, also known as hands-on history. I also wanted to leave lesson plans with the middle school advisors so they could use it with their kids in the future. When you're aiming for the stars, you have to have your steps because nobody can jump that high. So the first thing that I did was I met at Starbucks with my primary resource during the summer before the year started, because there's no better way to get started on your senior project than to do it before everything gets started. And I started to map out which guest speakers I wanted each month. And that was my goal at the beginning of the year, was to have guest speakers every month. But that was way too ambitious, and the school didn't want that, and I honestly didn't want that after my first 2 guest speakers. So we were able to figure out that we didn't want one every month, but I still wanted at least 4 events during the year. I spoke with the advisors about what they wanted to see improved in the 7th grade projects, because a lot of them are saying that they just got simple keynotes and stuff on simple topics, and they wanted to see them go more in depth and kind of understand and link history with the stuff in the modern day. So I started planning out a sample lesson plan to demonstrate my objective, and that was called #history, which was basically a lesson plan to gain the children's knowledge to connect modern communication with what happened in the past and how that would change history. And I shared the idea and the example with the advisors, and everybody seemed to really like where I was going, so I made more lesson plans. I aimed for 35, but like I said, everything I do is way too ambitious, so 35 is not a reasonable goal. And I compiled a list of resources, so I got a whole bunch of databases, and I wrote out a description of everything that the students could find on them, and then they would have somewhere to go that's academic for their research, but they wouldn't have to dig through everything, and they would know what they would find on each database. And then eventually I got the lesson plans approved by Ms. T after a lot of editing, and we finally sent the lesson plans out. So one of the things that I mentioned was that I really wanted to bring in guest speakers to have kids get an on-hand experience with history. My first guest speaker was a Civil War guest speaker who brought in a cannon that we took out to the field, and he was part of the Live History Association at UNLV, and he was very eager to help me out. And we actually got to go up there. You can see there's my squad and I. We went up there and we actually got to fire explosives out of the cannon. And I wish I could have taken more people, but everybody had to be over 16 if they were going up there for the safety, the safety of everybody. And then we got to bring the cannon out here and perform what we tried at the field up there, but we couldn't actually fire an explosive. We fired a blank. So he also taught about Civil War tactics in the West, which was a really fun assembly from what I heard. My second guest speaker was Sandra Cosgrove, and she is the head of the Women's Voting Association of Nevada. And I thought that this might be interesting because the voting election was coming up soon, and there was a lot of kids that were interested in the process. And Nevada is one of the very few caucus states we have. So I thought bringing her in and doing a mock caucus would kind of be a cool introduction to both government and history. So for the best interest of everything running smoothly and also keeping everybody's interests, we only invited the high school advisories, and we did a mock caucus, and everybody got a sign of a former president or historical figure, and we had to pick who we wanted to support for president, and then convince the others once somebody got knocked out. And the only thing I really remember, well, I will remember for the rest of my life, is everybody screaming George Washington as I frantically tried to keep them under control. So my last guest speaker was the Holocaust guest speaker. He was Stephen Nasser, and he was the author of My Brother's Voice. And this was somebody that I knew I wanted to come before I even got to school. This was somebody that I seen when I was in 6th grade, and I thought that it was a very enriching experience, and I thought that it would really give a first-hand look into history itself, because you don't really get a lot of people that had lived it that are willing to tell their stories. And so I scheduled him at the beginning of the year because he is very popular, and it's hard to get him scheduled last minute. So I did that for a long time, and it was one of the things I was really looking forward to throughout the entire year, because I wanted it to be this big thing for everybody. And he gave a first-hand story of the Holocaust, and he signed books afterwards to you or your family, and then you got to ask him personal questions, which I think was really cool. And I saw a lot of kids got kind of touched by that experience, which is what I was aiming for. So I also made some lesson plans because I want to be a teacher and teachers make lesson plans. So I taught the high school U.S. history class with original activities prior to the Civil War Assembly. And I created 10 project lesson plans for middle school advisories so kids could use them as frameworks. There's one, as an example, is Who's Who, in which the kids would choose a historical figure or a series of historical figures, and then they would have to play a guessing game based on the presentation that they gave prior. And then, so the Civil War lesson plans I taught in Ms. McIver's U.S. history class, and I split the class into the North and the South. And I basically had them make compromises and wartime decisions by each giving them a document that updated them on what war was going on and the personal interests of each of their sides. So they had to make compromises that would both fit their people, but also go to ensure that they wouldn't start a war. And once the war did start, they had to make wartime decisions on how to increase morale and react to the address of the Gettysburg and a whole bunch of fun things. And they said that they really liked it. So the topics for the middle school advisory lesson plans that I made, one of them was the historical battle master, in which a student can research a battlefield or an important battle landscape or battle monument and remake that, and also write a paper explaining it and then show the model off to the class. And historical architect is basically the same thing, but with a historical building like the Washington Monument and the Pentagon. Hashtag history, like I said before, was to link the modern communication to what has happened in history and how that would change. Miss Home Hero was a project about where you had to write something involving a famous woman who helped contribute a lot to wartime efforts during World War II, because that was a big rise in female empowerment and helping for wartime efforts. And then History in 10 Minutes was for the people that were really shy to go up and speak, so they created like a 10-minute documentary about their topic and going through everything that they would say in a normal presentation, but in a more creative way that they wouldn't have to get stressed out going up there. A World War Testimony was a journal that I basically made giving the students options on how to write a journal documenting the entirety of World War I through the eyes of an American soldier. And the Civil Rights Museum is a group project, and they get to create a museum exhibit documenting the civil rights movement. The Manifest Destiny is they have to advertise if they want to go to any of the Manifest Destiny states. Who's Who is the one I showed before, in which they had to guess historical figures based on the presentation that they previously gave. And History and Comics is where you get to make a comic book about your favorite historical character or historical event. And we actually had a student try that one out, and she said that it was a lot of fun, and it wanted to make her look more into history, which was the goal of all of these. So, as you guys know, I did the global project with my lovely partner, Andrea Padilla, and we tried to incorporate history and culture of each of the states in the United States of America. And if I had to sum it up in 2 words, it would be Channing Tatum. As you can see here, we have Channing Tatum, and I really can't tell the difference between everybody else. They all look like models next to Channing Tatum, too. So that was, I think, the overall description of Global Projects. But because I can't just say that, I would also have to say that it involved historical fun. You can see these people having fun exploring history because that was what the project was all about. It was trying to create an interactive way that they could involve themselves with the history of the United States without feeling like they're just reading up on dates and simple things that they weren't really interested in. And my, probably the most traumatizing experience in my entire life was when we had to make the travel itineraries so everybody would have a destined place to go around. And we spent 4 hours with Miss T working on this, 4 hours straight, 4 hours straight. And then we got finished and we were like, okay, and we were looking at it, and then Iowa was going to Iowa. And we were like, well, who are we missing? And then we had to go through like 3 or 4 times before we realized it was Kentucky. So on both of the travel itineraries, there was no Kentucky and there was more than 1 Iowa, and we were basically done at that point because it had been 4 hours and we had to get them done after lunch. So Andrea and I decided that we're never going to Iowa or Kentucky. So the requirements for this was that we needed them to create 2 well-crafted artifacts, and this was so that they would focus more on quality than quantity like we've had in other global projects. Notes on all of the subjects given, so they could take in the knowledge of everything, and create a cohesive and creative layout. So when you go to a museum, you see a nice layout and something that's interactive, and you saw those pictures before. Some of the people have really cool things like the Channing Tatum cutout. And you had to make an advertisement for your state, which a lot of people have fun with. That's pretty much half of my artifacts binder. So what resources did I use during this project? My main resource was a man named Mr. Veliska, and he was my teacher in 7th grade. He was my 7th grade US history teacher, and he was the one who inspired me to become a history teacher. So I thought, what better way to honor that and to kind of get myself into this flow of getting this hands-on experience with my new career than to go back to him and kind of tell him what he's done for me and what I want to do for the kids. And he really helped me by giving me lesson plans and guest speakers, and he kind of encouraged me going on the whole thing, which was something that I really needed, because when you go into the senior project, you feel a little discouraged. Miss McIver helped me because she is our lovely history teacher here, and she was definitely somebody who helped me rein back a lot, because even when I make stuff for other kids, I'm overly ambitious with that. So she helped me realize where the standards fall for students and how to incorporate that into grade level lesson plans. And I also used Teachers Pay Teachers for getting lesson plan ideas, and I would buy lesson plans and see what they did and then use them to make my own. And it was a good way so I didn't have to make everything from scratch. So the good things that happened, one of my favorite things, like I said, was the Holocaust guest speaker, and you can see me and Ms. T up there while he was signing books and talking to students, and we were trying to get that all done. And then I really liked the Springs Preserve field trip. I thought that it was a lot of fun, even though we had some complications with it. And I think that it was a good way for the kids to kind of get that first-hand experience before they started making their own. And they were also able to get out of school for that 4-week of 8-hour advisories. And the other good thing that I liked was shooting the cannon, because it's really fun to shoot a cannon. It's also really fun to order the other kids around because you're the commander. And it was scary too, but explosives. So the bad things, as you can see up there, there's a journal entry, and that was for the World War testimony. And I made that. It was beautiful, so perfect. I sent it to Miss T to put on Google Drive, all of the lines clumped up into one space, and there was like 5 or 6 pages of that. So I had to spend 45 minutes moving each line into the into the proper position for 45 minutes so that I could put that up on Google Docs. And the other thing that was bad was that I had to deal with a rather unsatisfactory first guest speaker when I was looking for the Civil War guest speaker. And when I told him that he couldn't really come, he sent me an email saying about how Miss Madsen was a liberal that was trying to oppress me and erase history, and that I need to watch out for liberals in the rest of my life, and that I needed to keep pursuing what I wanted to do. And it was it was one of the first times that I've ever had to deal with an email that was that crazy. And the other bad thing that happened was just all the stress that came with doing the gallery walk. And there was a lot of aspects that went into it, and I was super nervous, and I was already stressed out because I was doing so much else. But in the end, it turned out fine. And the ugly, the EKA museum walk, the global project, it was lovely. It had a lovely turnout, but that was probably the hardest thing I'll ever have to make in my life. There is something that is really difficult about incorporating 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade standards into one project. So to any seniors that want to do it next year, don't do it by yourself. Do it with somebody that you trust. Even with 2 people, it was hard. So just talk to your advisor about it, because you don't want to go through an entire semester of agony. And we also had those days where I would do nothing because I was too giddy, and I was so happy that we had such a good senior year, so I would just goof off. And you can see here an artifact from our goofing off. This is Miss T's lovely face. And I can assure you I have about 20 other pictures of that style on my iPad, and that was one of the bad things. So some of the artifacts that I had were the Some of the artifacts that I had were the Channing Tatum pictures. The funny thing about that was that I was going through my email to find pictures of the global project to put in my binder, and I found one that had like 20-something photos, and I opened it, and the first 3 pictures that loaded were Channing Tatum pictures, and I was like, they can't all be like this, right? There are all Channing Tatum pictures, all 28 of them in that document. So when I was making my slideshow, I was like, this is the first thing I find when it comes to the global project, so I think this is pretty much what sums it up. And I also had a lot of posters from the advertisements, and I actually have a lot of the ones from Iowa, even though I'm never going to Iowa. So what are some of the lessons I learned during this project? You need to be able to adapt to change. I can admit that I'm pretty tough to change. If somebody's trying to get me to do something that I don't want to do, I'll fight back, I'll claw back. But in the end, you really have to figure out how to learn to adapt to others and how to realize that sometimes your plans aren't what's going to work out for everybody. And that's going to help you in the workforce and for the rest of your life, no matter what you're doing. And you also need to learn how to face your fears. For those of you who don't know me, I have really bad social anxiety. So being able to go out and talk to people and get them to come to you to be a guest speaker or to help you give lesson plans or even to go and teach the classes like I did. It's hard, but you know that what you're doing is for a good cause and it's going to better you and everybody else that you know and that you're trying to work with. So you need to be able to face the fears even if they seem very daunting. You have to maintain your passion because during this year there was a point which I pretty much lost everything. Not in material wise, but I had given up, I was exhausted, and I didn't want to move on in anything, any of my classes, my senior project. But you have to realize that this is something that you want to do. I want to be a history teacher, and that is what I'm most passionate about. I want kids to learn, and I want kids to succeed. So even if I am feeling awful and I feel like I can't do anything, you need to go and focus on what you want to accomplish. Because as long as I know I can make those kids happy or help them learn something that they wouldn't previously do, that's what I'm passionate about. And even if I'm suffering, I'm still going to be passionate about that. So you have to be able to maintain that passion through everything. And you have to learn how to appreciate what you can do and not regret what you cannot. The biggest thing with the senior project is that it seems like everything that you do, there's a million other things to do along with it. But you need to really appreciate what you have done so far, because what you've done is magnificent. And this is such a big scale thing that if you start to think that you're not doing enough or that you're not accomplishing what you need to realize that what you have done has affected many people, and what you have done has been so much work, and what you have done deserves to be appreciated by you and by everybody else. So you should never give up on appreciating what you have and don't spend time regretting what you can't do, because every minute you spend being upset about something that you couldn't do is a minute that you're wasting coming up with something that you can do. So good luck to the future seniors and good luck to everybody. Thank you.